As you read in Dating Jane and the essay related to the painting, now titled The Exhumation, there were certain gender ideals that governed the way in which Americans believe women and men should conduct themselves. Under this construct, the so-called cult of domesticity, women were tied to the feminine domestic sphere as they were seen as naturally more nurturing, while men tied to the masculine public sphere were viewed as being naturally distant emotionally and physically and mentally stronger, thus better able to navigate the world of business, politics, and war than were women. Linton Park captures this ideal in The Exhumation as we see women mourners dramatically reacting to their finding the grave of their loved one. These women are overcome with emotion while the three men stoically stand near them, showing no emotion at all. This gender construct has a direct relationship with the debate surrounding America's entry into the Spanish-American War in 1898, as well as imagery tied to America's involvement in World War I. In political cartoons from the eve of the Spanish-American War, arbitration, or the desire to find a diplomatic resolution to the issues dividing Spain and America, was personified in the form of a woman, as reflected in this political cartoon from 1897. Arbitration and peace were viewed as feminine and thus were tied to female imagery. However, with a generation that had not directly witnessed the horrors of the Civil War, or had at the very least been too young to fight, increasingly became involved in politics, there was a general belief among those who favored a military response to perceived and real Spanish atrocities in Cuba that to embrace arbitration was to soften the nation and undermine the nation's masculine edge and patriotic spirit. As Democratic Senator John T. Morgan of Alabama argued, whenever we get to that period in our history that it is perfectly understood that we are never going to have another war, from that moment of time this republic is going to degenerate and her sons are going to forget the lessons and duties of patriotism. This gendered imagery and language continued to come to bear on the political debate surrounding whether or not to go to war with Spain. In this political cartoon, the figure labeled business is big business in drag, as the figure grabs onto Uncle Sam, confidently holding a gun and marching toward war. The caption to the cartoon has business pleading, quote, "Oh, don't go to war, Sam. It would just kill me," unquote. As business leaders believed a war with Spain could hurt economic growth, their political opponents cast them in a feminine light. To urge for peace was simply not a manly position. President McKinley was also fair game to target, as he was reluctant to flippantly enter into a war with Spain. As seen here, the cartoonist has Uncle Sam using a rifle with a fixed bayonet to cure the president of his spineless and cowardly attitude toward Spain. The caption indicates that Uncle Sam is telling McKinley, quote, "All that you need is a backbone," unquote. McKinley, leaning toward arbitration, indicated to his opponents that he was not being a man and willing to fight Spain. Similarly, but possibly more dramatically, this cartoon depicts McKinley using a broom to try to hold back the tide of Congress and public opinion as support for war with Spain was growing. Notably, the cartoonist has dressed the president as a woman, reinforcing the connection between arbitration and femininity. However, it should be noted that McKinley was older than many of those aggressively seeking war with Spain. McKinley, pictured here, had actually seen combat during the Civil War as he was an officer in the Union Army. In fact, McKinley was part of General Crook's 1864 invasion of the New River Valley, during which the Battle of Cloyd's Mountain occurred, which was the largest battle fought in southwestern Virginia and took place on part of what is today the campus of New River Community College. McKinley fought in the battle and accompanied Union troops as they retreated through Christiansburg and Blacksburg and then into Giles County, marching into West Virginia by passing Mountain Lake, where Dirty Dancing was eventually filmed. So unlike many of the younger congressmen embracing war with Spain, McKinley knew what war was about as he witnessed it firsthand. In the end, war with Spain occurred. However, the gender ideals that had been tied to America's entry into the war remained a part of the American mind. Possibly you picked up on this as you explored early 20th century advertisements. As seen in this advertisement for Ivory Soap from 1925, it is clear that the woman was tied to the home as the advertisement informs women that, quote, your hands can keep their good looks even though they work in the kitchen, unquote. The ad goes on to state, quote, the question women ask every day is, can I do dishes, wash clothes, and clean house and still have hands that do not confess it? Unquote. And of course the answer is yes, as long as women were using ivory soap. So of course the gentleman taking the woman's hand in the ad would never know that she is not in a financial position to hire a servant to take care of domestic chores, chores all defined at the time as women's work. So she may just be able to land herself a wealthy husband due to the help that ivory soap gives her hands. Yes, this advertisement reflects the institutional matrix nicely. World War I continued to reflect these gender ideals. Propaganda posters from the war quite often tapped into these gender constructs. As seen here, a monster representing Germany has taken a woman, breasts exposed, captive. The monster has crossed the Atlantic and is setting foot on American soil. This poster appeals to chivalric expectations. Men, true men, will fight to protect women. In this poster, men are forced to contemplate a future where their children may ask them their role in the Great World War. How could they tell them they were a coward and did not serve? And in these two posters, we see the famous Christie girls. Artist and illustrator Howard Chandler Christie became known for the women he used in advertisements and propaganda posters. Collectively, they were known as the Christie girls. To the left, we see a Christie girl in a somewhat suggestive way playing off of Uncle Sam and declaring, I want you. But then, breaking the hint at seduction, the message is clear, for the Navy. However, the second poster attempts to emasculate the male viewer as a woman claims that she wishes she were a man so that she could join the Navy. Here we have the male viewer confront the fact that this woman, who is portrayed in a somewhat flirtatious pose, very feminine, yet wearing a masculine uniform, is possibly braver than he is. In essence, all of these posters suggest that men should be true men and enlist. Gender, definitions of masculine and feminine, clearly shaped imagery and even debate surrounding the Spanish-American War and World War I. But of course, these ideals continued to shape much of American society up to the present, even though the cult of domesticity is not as strong by any means today as it was during much of America's history. At this time, I want to explore some of these themes in a little more detail by examining a pop hit from the 1980s. At this time, go back to the Unit 2 folder and click on the link to Michael Jackson's 1982 hit, Beat It. After watching the music video and listening to the lyrics, watch the Unit 2 Lecture 3 Part 2 video.